Hello and welcome to the Solve Network. I'm Shane Borza, host of the podcast. Along with my co-founder Benjamin Goss, we'd like to welcome you. Our mission is to provide solutions and create a network of experts for you to learn from. We hope this episode and expert helps you to learn, grow, and move forward. And now, on with the show.
Scene one, Apple, take one.
Hi, I'm Shane Borza, your content creator coach. I have 2 books on filmmaking, Film Notes, where you learn to write, direct, and produce, and the Film Notes Workbook, where you can learn checklists and paperwork to streamline creating your content. Available at shaneborza.com. I also have filmmaker resources like the Paperwork Bundle with over 300 documents, the Sound Effects Bundle with almost 3,000 files, and the Music Bundle featuring 900 tracks of all genres. Want to build your professional credits? Become an associate producer and get listed on IMDb. Let me help you get your art out into the world.
Scene one, Apple, take one.
And I do have some questions here in the chat, but before I get into any of those, since we do have a couple of people on the call, I wanted to let anyone dive in. Just feel free to unmute yourself and talk directly to Tim. Otherwise, I'm going to dig into a couple of these questions.
Okay, Tim. My question comes, well, good job on the presentation.
Thank you.
The topic is quite intriguing because many owners, especially whether they came online because of the pandemic and now a good part of their business is online right now, or people who are veterans and they're just looking to expand. How do you, and I know it wasn't a topic, but I didn't quite hear it. How do you assess which tools a owner should prioritize to run their business? What's your method of doing it?
Yeah, so it's you got to go through the process and understand what that business is specifically about, right? I think a lot of the challenges with marketing is people tend to get very prescriptive and they apply the same things to everybody, but everybody's business is a little bit different, even if you're in the same industry. And so, your goals, Craig, for your business, what you want your business to look like may be completely different than mine. And that's okay, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But what you want your business to look like in the end and what your goals are has a huge impact on what, tactics, tools, strategies you should be using within your business. And so in order to start looking at what's best for any one particular company, we need to understand the entire picture. We have to look at it from a holistic perspective first, and then we can start to dig into the details of what channels are going to work best for you, what tactics are going to work best for you. So for example, look, what I'm doing right now is a marketing tactic, right? It's speaking, it's getting in front of other people's audience. This works as a way to generate new business. But if you said to me, Craig, you said to me, gosh, Tim, I can't stand public speaking. I hate it. I don't like being on video. If I told you to do that, it's never going to work. You have to be invested in it. And so that's why we can't get prescriptive and go, hey, well, you got to have a podcast. Everybody's got to have a podcast. Well, no, everybody doesn't have to have a podcast because it's not going to work for everybody. So we have to look at it from a holistic perspective, get the entire picture, and then we can start to drill in on what's going to work best for that particular business. Does that help?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
I'm going to jump back in with a couple of these questions in the chat, but if anyone else has anything, feel free to jump in between the next kind of question and answer. Outside of wasting money on perhaps poor marketing, are there any kind of 3 to 5 mistakes that most new business owners or business owners, I guess, in general, always make?
Gosh, it's varied, but I'll give you the ones that come to mind first and foremost. The first one obviously is I talked about the fundamentals. So many people jump into tactics immediately. That is one of the biggest mistakes that I see people making. The other one I also touched on in the presentation, which is we talk, a lot of businesses tend to talk too much about themselves, and our customers do not care. They care about the problem that they have or the need that they have that they want to get fixed, okay, or the result that they're looking for. And when we communicate with people, we need to touch on those problems and those needs and start to talk about the results that we can help them get. That's what they care about, okay? The other thing I would say a lot of business owners do is they don't have a plan. They're thinking too short term. And when they think short term, they make short term decisions which aren't always the best aren't always in our best interest in the long term. We need to think about our businesses from a marketing perspective and from a long-term perspective, because we're going to make much better decisions, and we're going to be much more patient. A lot of business owners are very impatient when it comes to marketing. I need to generate leads tomorrow. Well, that's great, but these aren't switches where you can turn on and off. There is low-hanging fruit oftentimes. But man, if you're impatient, you're just going to be jumping from one thing to the next. And it's never going to get you the traction that you need to get to where you want to be. So I hope that helps.
Tim, I have one more question.
Yeah.
And I'm asking from multiple perspectives, but if let's say you have a business owner and right now, maybe they used to have a physical office, but due to the pandemic and places being closed, and now they don't rent anymore, so they work from home. So now they do this, they conduct their services primarily online, but in customers, and maybe they were in a good location before, but now they have no location, right? What would be so now they need customers and they're looking for that, but they don't have a huge budget. What would be your advice on that particular individual?
So this somewhat depends on the type of business, but what I'll touch on for you here, Craig.
Just for clarification's sake, it's a services business. So something that they could do.
Okay, so services business, and their market is local.
Well, for argument's sake, let's say it's not. So let's say they have local customers, but it could be administered.
Okay. So it could be all over the place.
Yes.
Okay. So here's some low-hanging fruit typically. One, you got to make sure your website is where it needs to be. Does it have a clear message? Does it have a clear path that it's walking people through? Do you have good calls to action that tell people what you want them to do next? Okay, you got to get that dialed in first and foremost. Okay. The next lowest hanging fruit that I see most commonly is email marketing, especially if you don't have a large budget. Okay, email marketing is not, especially if you manage it yourself, it is not all that. It's very reasonable, and email still works. Okay, we should all be spending time building our email list. Why? Because our email list is a marketing channel that we own. Nobody can take that away from you. When we look at marketing channels, there's ones you rent and ones you own. Your website, you own. Your email marketing, you own. No matter where you go, you have those. Social media, we rent. Paid ads, we rent. SEO, we're renting, right? We don't own that. Google changes algorithms all the time. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't take advantage of those channels, but I think we should be using those channels to get people to channels that we own. So your email marketing, if you don't have an email list already, I would start, the day to start building your email list is today. Okay. It may take you some time depending on where you're at, but you should absolutely start building that. From a quick lead standpoint, okay. If you have a little bit of a budget, paid ads like Facebook or Google can be a great way to bring in leads faster while you invest in other channels that are going to take a little bit more time to build. Okay. The other thing in a service business, okay, in a service, I'm just going to assume that it's a service business like mine, okay, coach, consultant, a professional service provider of some kind, an attorney, somebody that is selling their expertise. For people like that, creating content is really important, okay, because nobody works with a financial advisor unless they trust them. I'm not going to hand my money over to you unless I trust you. Content from an online perspective helps build credibility and trust. Okay. And then the other thing that I would say too goes back to a point I made earlier, which is whether you're having to take your business online or offline, look at what's already working. If what's already working is already online or can be transitioned to online, take advantage of that. And then the last thing is referrals. Okay, referrals are huge for almost any business. So make sure if you don't have a referral system in place, referral partners, strategic partnerships, those are things that I would absolutely look at first and foremost. So I know I covered a little bit of ground there, but I hope that gave you some ideas for low-hanging fruit that you might be able to focus on if you're really trying to shift from offline to going online.
So a couple other things here. I have a question. How does an outside professional speed things up? And is there a break-even point on help? And if so, how do you know?
That's a good question. I think looking at speeding things up is probably not a great mindset to get into, because I think you will start to think short-term rather than long-term. Okay. But if you do want to speed up your results, which most of us do, go back to what I've touched on a couple of times and look at what's already working. Make sure you're optimizing that as much as possible. Start with the end, okay, where that process ends, and work your way backwards to see whether you have gaps somewhere that you need to fill, or whether you can do more at any given step to boost the results. Okay. That I think is the easiest place to speed things up. Paid ads is another place to speed things up, but a lot of companies don't. There's a lot of small businesses out there that just don't have the budget to speed things up with paid ads. Some of them get into it and they try to manage it themselves. And, personally, I just feel like that's not a great approach unless you really understand Google ads or Facebook ads. Those things, they are a beast in and of themselves. And you can waste a lot of money really quick if you don't know what you're doing. So my opinion is, if you don't know what you're doing, you are better off paying somebody, but paying somebody is going to be an additional cost on top of whatever you're spending on your ads. So you just need to keep that in mind. Referrals can certainly be another way to speed things up a bit if you have existing referral partner relationships. But man, if you don't have, people don't just start referring you immediately. It takes a long time to build relationships, right? Which is why, I'm always saying a lot of these tactics from a marketing standpoint do take time. And a lot of marketing people don't help business owners out because they start making promises about, hey, do this, and this is what's going to happen in 30 days. It's just not realistic in most cases. It takes a while to build an email list. It takes a while to start seeing results from content, because it's, the days of posting a blog post and getting, found and having 1 million visits, those days are over. That doesn't happen. So you need to go into this with realistic expectations and a long-term point of view.
I just want to comment that I think a lot of these, it's like you're just dripping gold here, and they're not just answers. Like I hope that whether people are listening live or on the replay, that they're really taking in these answers, because having made the transition several years ago from like having a corporate job where, they had an advertising department and they have a department for everything. There's a lot of people in there, they have all these resources, especially it was a big multimedia international company. It's not like that when you have a small business or you're a solopreneur or you have a side hustle, and learning how to do all this on your own from scratch is really hard. And as much as you can learn from YouTube University, you can't learn everything there. And it is worth your time to get expert advice, whether you hire that person or you just go learn from them. So one of the reasons I really love that we do this in this format is it gives people a chance to kind of shine and present and be like, hey, here's some tips, tricks, and tools that I know. But it also gives us a chance to do this, which is have a discussion and kind of dig deeper into some of these things.
Can I pull something out of what you just said that I think is really important?
Sure thing.
So we don't need to, so often as business owners, we feel like we got to reinvent the wheel every time, not just with marketing, but with everything else. The systems, the processes, the frameworks, the methodologies to success, they're already out there. We just need to know where to go to find those and get out there and find them and then incorporate them in our business. So, all I'm talking, I didn't invent what I'm talking about today. It's not new, right? I mean, when you look at marketing or sales, there's like 5 or 6 pages of marketing. There's 5 or 6 pages of sales. There's 5 or 6 pages of operations. Everybody out there like me that is talking about one of these disciplines we're just reframing these things in a way that makes sense to us, that we also believe is going to make sense to other people. So you just need to find those people that have those frameworks that work, that make sense to you, and implement them. So.
Yeah, well said. The next question I have here is, how do you know if you need a done for you, a done with you, or a done by yourself type of service?
So a lot of times it depends on, there's not necessarily one answer here. What I'll tell you is, one, a lot of times it depends on what your budget is. Obviously, if it's DIY, it's going to be less expensive. If it's done for you, it's going to be a lot more expensive. So budget, oftentimes it limits people. If you have a limited budget, man, it's just not realistic to expect that you're going to get great done for you service work for you. We can go online and find people overseas that'll do done for you work for not a lot of money. That doesn't mean that that's going to be the best thing for you, because you get what you pay for. So you need to go into that with the eyes wide open. But the other thing too is, sometimes, like, even if you do have the money to do done for you work, sometimes if marketing is my thing, well, and it's the highest and best use of my time, then maybe I shouldn't be paying somebody for it. Maybe I should be doing it and go to other aspects of my business and hire that out to somebody else. Okay, so it depends on budget. It also depends on what you're good at. Like, what are your gifts? What are your talents? I think we've all, as business owners, done things within our business that are not in our gifts, that we're not good at, and the end result is not good. So we need to understand ourselves and what we're good at, plug ourselves into that part of our business, and then start to look at how we can bring other people on to manage and do those other aspects of our business that we are not good at. So I know there's 2 aspects of that, and both aspects I think are really important. But I find most of the time what determines DIY or coaching or consulting is budget first and foremost.
How would you advise someone to help them perhaps figure out what to spend on marketing? If there is no, super heavy constraint, if it's just a matter of like, I don't know, should I spend $100 a week or $1,000 a week? Like, is there a way to figure that out?
There are some general rules of thumb. Okay, so I mean, it's a lot of people ask, how much should I be spending on my marketing? Well, the answer is it depends. You'll hear people say, well, it should be 5 to 10% of revenue. Okay, but that doesn't work for everybody, right? So how much you should spend a lot of times depends on what your goals are. How much money. Do you have goals of growing a huge company? Lot of sales. Well, then you need to invest a lot of money in marketing to make that happen. But if you don't have grandiose goals, you may not have to spend as much, right? So what your goals are is certainly going to determine that. But the other thing that also determines it is, what's your profitability like? Some products and services have very low margins. Others are incredibly high. If I'm selling something that has incredibly high margins, well, I may be able to take a lot more top line revenue and shift that to marketing than I can if I'm working on lower margins. So, yes, you can take general rules of thumb, 5 to 10%, but it's going to depend on what your long-term goals are and what your profitability is like. Because if you're working on really low margins, you may not be able to take 5% of top line revenue to invest back in marketing. So you have to look at all of those things to get the entire picture to really determine. And the bottom line is, Shane, if somebody says to me, well, what do I need to spend? And I give them a number. Well, if they don't believe in that number, they're just going to think I'm full of it anyways. So the owner has to buy into that number and has to be invested in that number for anything to work anyways.
I think it's very wise for you to say, and again, this is kind of the theme is, with pretty much every question, it's like, well, it depends. It's like, what kind of business do you have? What kind of, so, but it really does depend. And I have a lot of different coaching certifications and backgrounds. And so when people kind of ask me like, well, what kind of coach are you? I'm like, well, it depends. Like, what kind of, am I mentoring someone? Am I consulting with someone? Am I, even just the structure of what the service is depends. And I could say I'm a life coach. I could also say I'm a health coach. I could also say I'm a fitness coach. I'm all of those things. So it's kind of like within the context in the background of what's going on. So I hope that people take away what it depends on and don't just get hung up on it depends and think like, well, there is no answer. It's like, well, there is, but the answer is going to come more from, I think, the person answering those questions that you threw out.
Yes, we gotta dig a little bit below the surface to find the answer that's right for us. Otherwise, we're going back to what I touched on earlier about getting prescriptive and just putting everybody into the same box. And that's not serving most people well at all. We need to dig deeper, look at your personal situation, and then we can pull the right answer out. So yeah, getting prescriptive is not, in my opinion, is not the best way to go.
I'm really excited to hear what you're going to say about this. A lot of people will say, it's sales and marketing, but of course, those are two different things. So how would you separate those? And what do people most confuse perhaps between the two?
I love this question because there's so many people that think, it's sales separate from marketing, right? They're these two distinct departments. In my opinion, and I've always viewed it this way, sales and marketing go hand in hand. I mean, they're brother and sister. And if they're not on the same page, you're never going to be firing on all cylinders. When I started this presentation, I talked about the definition of marketing is to get in front of somebody that has a need or a problem you can solve and get them to know, like, and trust you. Well, once we get that person to know, like, and trust us with our marketing, they get handed off to sales. When they raise their hand and go, yes, I want to talk to you, that goes to sales. And if there's a poor transition there, you're not going to convert those leads to sales nearly as well as you should. If the message that they hear on the marketing side all of a sudden shifts when it goes to sales, you're not going to convert as well as you should. Right? So that marketing message that I talked about, it's not just for marketing. That infiltrates your entire company. It goes from marketing to sales to customer service. That customer needs to be hearing the same darn thing no matter who they're talking to. So these are not islands that are separate. They're all the same. Okay? Think of them, they're not islands that are separate. Think of them that are states that are bordering on each other. They gotta be in concert here. And if they're not, everything's going to suffer from it. So, I see that transition. Once somebody raises their hand saying, yes, I'm interested, and becomes a lead, it shifts from marketing to sales. But the handoff needs to be seamless, and the message needs to be the same from one to the next. So they have to be seen as brother, sister, and closely related. Otherwise, your business is going to suffer in one way, shape, or form.
I thought that analogy was great. I've never heard that before, but the idea of they're not separate islands, they're states that border each other. I mean, just the visual of that, the kind of premise behind that, I think that's brilliant. So I hope that everybody really is able to see how much that works. And I can definitely say that people personally that say, I've had people recommend a certain business based on the customer service they had because something didn't go right. And that's pretty phenomenal when you think about it. Like, I had a bad experience, but the follow-up or the solution to the problem was so good that I'm going to recommend this thing, even though I had a problem.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and think about it this way too.
Keeping that through line of everything is the same, giving them the same experience throughout, giving them the same answers, being on the same page.
Think about it from this standpoint. Repeat and referral business is super important for all of us. That's not just marketing. That actually has more to do with how things were handled in the sales process and how things were handled from a customer service process standpoint. What was the onboarding like? Was it a consistent experience? Did they communicate well? If those things are falling through the cracks, you're never going to get repeat and referral business. So all of these things are interconnected. You can't look at them as separate. They are one and the same.
So I've got two last questions, and then we'll start to wrap up. The first is, do you have any metrics that you use or pay attention to, such as like investment versus return, to establish or perhaps show a client or customer that the marketing is working or it's worth the spend on that particular thing?
Yeah. So this is digging a little bit deeper than the metrics that I touched on in the presentation about leads, source, and conversions. But if you're looking at a specific channel, what you really need to look at, and it depends on what channel it is. There are specific, metrics for that may be, relevant for one channel and not another. But I think a couple metrics that come to mind that I think are really important in any given channel is what your cost per lead is. Okay. How much it's costing you to get a lead from that channel. And then you also have to understand what the lifetime value of a client is. Okay. So many times business owners think, oh, well, my average ticket sale is whatever. Let's just say it's $2,000. Okay. Well, that's your first sale. Do you have repeat business from customers? Do they buy monthly after that? If they do, how long does the average customer stay with you? We need to look at all of those to determine the lifetime value of a client. So, if I look at it and just go, oh, well, it's $2,000 and it's a one-time sale, that's one thing. But if I look at it and say, oh, it's a $2,000 sale, but then, they stay with us for X months and they spend X amount of dollars every month, let's say that's 20 grand. Well, now I have $22,000 lifetime value. All of a sudden, that now means that I can pay more to acquire a lead, right? Once you understand those two numbers, and then you also look at your conversions, okay, your conversions within that channel, then you understand what your acquisition cost is, right? So let's say I convert, for every 3 leads, I convert 1 customer, and I'm spending $100 a lead. That means it costs me $300 to acquire a customer. When I know that it's cost me $300 to acquire a customer, and the lifetime value of that client is $22,000, right? Now that's top line revenue. So if I really want to dig deeper, I can look at what's the gross profit on that. If I look at what the gross profit is on that, then I can start to go, okay, well, let's say it costs $300 to acquire that customer in that channel, and that customer is worth a gross profit of 10 grand, or even if it's $1,000, I know that that's profitable, right? Now, if it's not profitable, that's a problem, right? I got to get out of that. I got to get out of that, or I got to figure a way to make those numbers work. But to me, those are some of the most important metrics you need to start looking at to really understand whether the marketing that you're doing is working. But marketing can work and it's not profitable, as I just walked through. So just because it's working doesn't mean that it's profitable. It needs to work and it needs to be profitable. So we need to look at all those things. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. And again, I think that people get hung up on the things like, well, how much are the ads costing? Or some of those things like you mentioned. It's like, well, that doesn't really matter. What matters is, are they effective? Let's dive into how many interactions they had, how many leads are generated, what's the conversion of leads to clients, those types of things. So again, it's not these surface answers. It's diving deeper and spending a little more time and maybe a little more effort into kind of getting those numbers.
Yeah.
But then having the true data, which will help you move forward.
Yep.
So I want to open it up again and see if anyone else has any other thoughts or questions before I ask the last one that I have. Okay, if anyone has anything else, feel free to jump in after this one. How do you avoid confusing traction for closed sales or revenue?
Expand upon that a little bit.
So Ben asked that question, so I'll ask him to jump in and talk a little bit more about that. Ben, you there? Oh, I guess with interaction versus revenue.
So he was talking about traction versus actual revenue.
Yeah, he says interaction versus revenue. Or yes, what you just said. Sorry, he has background noise. He just want to there are some things that you're going to do from a marketing standpoint initially that won't lead to direct revenue initially, right? So for example, email list sign up. Okay, I get somebody that signs up on my email list. Every person that you add to your email list is traction, but it may not immediately amount or equate to revenue. Okay, so some of those things are going to take time, which is again why you have to give these things time and start to look at the numbers. Over time, I think you can start to equate numbers to that traction, but initially you're not going to have that data, right? But over time, because the other thing that comes up, and I don't know what the exact statistic is, I've heard it vary, but it's somewhere like, I've heard it anywhere from like 5 to 10% of your market at any given one time is ready to buy. So if we think about that, we have to stay in front of people all the time, top of mind, so that when they do fall into that small percentage that is looking to solve that problem and ready to buy, that they think of us. Outside of that, the other 90% or whatever it may be, okay, it's a large percentage that is not ready to buy. We just need to stay in front of them. Okay. So, the activities that we do
some of it is going to take time, and that's where we're starting to gain traction. So, look, adding people to your email list, I think that's a great thing. That's traction. Until you can actually say, you know what, for every 10 people that come on our email list, we get a customer. Until you can get that data, the only thing you can look at that as is traction. Okay. But that goes back to one of my earlier points about thinking long-term. I think, yes, we need to get a return, but sometimes if people get too return focused, they're not going to give the actions they're taking enough time to start to work either. So there is a balance there. And I think that's more of an art than a science, to know that. But you have to have the awareness to go, you know what? Have I given this enough time or have I not? Am I starting to see some traction here that is going to encourage me to still do this? Or if I'm not getting any traction, then maybe I shouldn't continue to do this, right? But look, I'll give you a perfect example. Okay. I do a lot of guest podcast speaking. Unless you're on the top, 1% podcasts that have tons of traffic, most guest podcasting is not going to immediately generate revenue. Okay. It may over time, it's going to help your business over time, but it builds upon itself. So if I looked at that and just said, man, I've done five guest podcast spots and I haven't done any business, I'm going to stop doing that. It's not working. I'm completely overlooking the relationship building aspect of guest podcasting. Those relationships over time can be worth way more money than, a sale that you got from a guest podcast spot. So, you have to have the awareness and be able to step back and look at things as objectively as possible, rather than just, if you're too numbers focused, you're going to overlook certain things in marketing and you're going to miss out. I hope I answered that question.
I know that was definitely a very impactful answer to me. And yes, I see a yes.
Okay.
Yes, well done. You got it.
Okay,
well
cool.
I was saying, what's my question?
I thought I was on the right path, but I wasn't quite sure. So awesome. I'm glad I hit the nail on the head.
I want to thank everyone for joining us, and thank you, Tim, for both the presentation and the discussion. As I said earlier, I think both parts are really helpful. I want to kind of throw the ball back to you, though, and give you a chance to talk about where you'd like people to either find you, connect with you, reach out to you, if you have anything coming up you want people to know about, or any offers that you've got going on right now.
Thanks for that, Shane. I appreciate that. Like I mentioned near the end of the presentation, the best place to go is our website, rialtomarketing.com, which is RIALTO marketing.com. If you want to connect with me personally, the best place to do that is LinkedIn. And I'm at linkedin.com/in/Tim P as in Paul Fitzpatrick. But if you go to our website, all our social links are there. We create a ton of content. I got a podcast that I do 2 episodes a week. There's tons of free resources there. You can also include the free resource link that I gave at the end of the presentation. That'll help folks with the fundamentals. And like I said, if you're hitting roadblocks, you feel like, your hands are just going up in the air, like, I don't know what the next right step is, or I've tried all these things and nothing's working, schedule a free consult with me. Just hit the get a free consult button. I would be happy to chat with you and give you some clarity on what those next right steps are for you, so that you have those priorities, you have clarity, and your stress goes down.
So thank you for sharing all that you talked about, as well as that information at the end. Thank you again for everyone who is here live on the call. And for those who listen to this later, please connect with Benjamin and myself. We are both on LinkedIn. I am Shane Borza. He is Benjamin Goss, and we will see you on the next call. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, guys.
Hey, my name is James. I'm a lawyer who's always been interested in optimal human performance, and that's how I found Shane. If you're looking to upgrade your mental and physical fitness, then the Ultimate Performance course is for you. It's the key to performing better at work, at home, and in all of life's challenges. I've also found it to be a great community of like-minded and supportive professionals. As Shane says, together, everyone accomplishes more.
Want to have your ultimate performance or find out more about how to optimize your mind and body fitness? Contact me at shaneborza.com and see if the DIY or the group program would be best for you. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Solve Network. These interviews are from our web series of the same name. Want to watch? Head over to YouTube and search for the Solve Network. If you have questions, you can reach out to me at shaneborza.com. On behalf of my co-founder, Benjamin Goss, we're glad you are a part of the network and hope you are finding solutions. If you need solutions, please reach out.